Snow explodes as 10 wolves drag a bleeding woman off the frozen mountain road, her biker vest shredded, her screams vanishing into the storm. Eli, a homeless kid who sleeps under bridges, knows he can run and live, or step into the dark and fight monsters way bigger than him. When he swings that rusted tire iron and sees the patch on her vest, the one every outlaw fears, he realizes someone sent these wolves to erase her. Minutes later, the roar of 300 engines shakes the mountain, and what those Hell's Angels do next changes everything. Welcome to the Echo Tales family. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, because this kind of story will hit your heart in ways you won't see coming. To everyone who's been riding with this channel from day one, may God keep pouring blessings over you. Now, what you're about to step into is the journey of a homeless boy who refused to look away, who chose the harder right and put his own life on the line for a woman she barely knows. Snow exploded in front of Eli as the first wolf slammed Maria off the mountain road and into the ditch. 1 second the old woman was a stumbling shape in the snowstorm, leather vest flapping, blood dripping from her sleeve. The next, she vanished beneath a blur of gray fur and teeth, her scream ripped away by the wind. Headlights from a distant truck swung uselessly across the curve and disappeared, leaving only the whiteout, the dark trees, and the sound of animals feeding. Eli froze in the tree line, bare toes burning in the snow, fingers tight around the rusted tire iron he dug out of a scrap pile that morning. If he walked away now, nobody would ever know. If this kind of story already has your heart racing, stay with it. Hit like so more people find it, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far Eli's story travels across the world. He could still turn back, fade into the dark like he always did when things got loud. That was what invisible kids did in Frostbite Ridge. They slipped into alleys, under loading docks, behind dumpsters when cops rolled past or drunks started swinging. Nobody came looking. Nobody asked why a 17-year-old boy slept under bridges while the river ice creaked like bones. Eli had learned to move like smoke, to exist in places people never bothered to look. But the sound coming from the ditch wasn't just fear. It was the raw, breaking howl of someone who knew death personally and still wasn't ready to leave. Help, the woman choked, her voice shredded. Please. The wolves answered for her. A low, rumbling growl rolled up the slope, followed by the wet rip of teeth in flesh. Eli's stomach flipped. His breath steamed in front of his face, too fast, too sharp. His body screamed at him to get out, to slip back into the trees, to pretend he'd never seen any of this. That was survival. That was how he'd made it through the winter his father threw him out and never opened the door again. Run, the voice that used to keep him alive hissed. She's done. You can't fix this. You're just a homeless kid with a piece of junk metal. Another sound cut through the storm, the small, broken sob of someone who had fought as long as they could and finally hit the wall. Eli stepped forward. Snow swallowed his ankles as he slid down the embankment, the cold biting like knives into skin already cracked and bleeding. The storm tried to shove him back, wind clawing at his threadbare hoodie. He gritted his teeth and kept moving. The wolves didn't see him at first. They were a tight circle of muscle and fur, shoulders bunched, tails low, 10 bodies locked around something on the ground like petals of a living, snarling flower. Hey! Eli's voice cracked, too high, too human against the animal noise. 3 heads snapped toward him at once. Yellow eyes glowed in the dark, pupils pin-sharp slits. One wolf's muzzle was red to the eyes, strings of saliva and blood dripping onto the snow. Another still had Maria's sleeve clenched in its teeth, tugging, trying to tear her arm free. Beneath them, Eli saw flashes of pale skin, gray hair plastered to the road grit, a leather vest shredded down one side. He didn't look at her face. If he saw her eyes, he knew he'd freeze. The lead wolf stepped away from the pile, slow and deliberate, placing each paw like it owned the earth. It was bigger than the others, shoulders thick, head broad, a ragged scar splitting one ear. It studied Eli the way men in bars had studied him when they decided whether to shove him away or kick him until he stopped moving. Eli lifted the tire iron. His hands shook so hard the metal rattled. His heart beat everywhere at once, in his throat, his skull, his fingertips. 10 wolves. One half-starved boy. This wasn't a fight. It was a sentence. Back off, he rasped. The wolf bared its teeth. It lunged. Eli barely got the iron up in time. The impact ripped through his arms, knocked him sideways into the snow. Hot breath blasted his face, thick with meat and rot. He shoved, screaming, and swung blindly. The iron connected with bone. There was a sickening thud, a yelp that sounded almost human, and the wolf stumbled, claws scrabbling for purchase on the ice. The circle broke. 2 more wolves came at him, a blur of fur and snapping jaws. Eli dug his heels into the snow, pivoted like he used to when he dodged punches in the shelter hallway, and drove the iron into the closest ribcage. He felt something give. The wolf howled, twisting away. Teeth scraped his forearm, ripping fabric, drawing a line of fire along his skin. Pain made his vision go white around the edges. He staggered backward until his heel hit something soft. He risked a glance down. Maria's face stared up at him, eyes wide, skin gray under the blood. Deep lines carved the corners of her mouth, the kind that came from laughing loud and often, now twisted into a grimace. Her left leg was a mess of shredded denim and torn flesh. Blood soaked the snow around her, turning the white into a spreading, ugly black in the dim light. "Kid," she wheezed, grabbing his ankle with a shaking hand. They were sent. Not wild. They're trained. A wolf snapped at Eli's shoulder. He jerked away, swung again. The iron clipped its jaw, enough to knock it sideways. "Who?" Eli gasped. "Who sends wolves after old ladies?" "Not old," she coughed, a ghost of a grin flashing for a heartbeat. "Ledger. They want the ledger. Can't let them." Her words broke into a scream as another wolf clamped down on her boot and dragged. Eli dropped to his knees, slamming the tire iron across its snout. Bone cracked. The animal yelped and let go, but more were circling now, testing, closing in. They're not just hungry, he realized. They're coordinated. Snow whirled around them in frantic spirals, the storm hissing in his ears like static. Eli could feel how small he was, how thin. The cold sank deeper with every passing second, numbing his fingers, creeping up his legs. His arms burned from swinging. He was already slowing, and the wolves knew it. Predators always knew when the fight was bleeding out of you. He thought of nights behind the grocery store, watching families step over him on their way to warm cars. He thought of his father's back as the doors slammed, the chains sliding into place. He thought of all the times he pretended not to hear someone else being hurt because he was so sure no one would ever come if it was him. Not tonight. Eli planted his feet in the ruined snow and dragged Maria up against his legs, putting his body between her and the circle. "You're going to live," he growled, surprising himself with how certain it sounded. "You hear me? You're not dying in a ditch like trash." Something flickered in her eyes. Not hope. Something older. Recognition. "You sound like my boy," she whispered. One of the wolves moved, and the headlights from that distant truck swung just enough to catch the back of Maria's vest where it had twisted around her shoulder. Red and white stitching glowed in the beam, clear and unmistakable even through the snow and blood. Hell's Angels. Eli's breath hitched. He'd seen that patch on TV once, filling a courtroom screen during a documentary some bar had left playing all night. He'd heard the stories in the shelter line, their violence, their brotherhood, the way they rode for their own. He'd never seen it this close. Never imagined it sewn to the back of a woman old enough to be somebody's grandmother. "You're with them?" he blurted, knocking a wolf's snapping jaws away from her face. "Mother," she gasped. "Razor's mother. They sent me to deliver proof." "Kid, if they get that ledger," her fingers dug into his ankle, urgent, desperate. "They'll burn this whole town off the map." Before Eli could answer, before he could even ask where the ledger was, the lead wolf recovered. It launched straight at his throat. He barely managed to twist, bringing the tire iron up in a sloppy, exhausted arc. The impact jarred his entire body, sent pain lancing down his spine. They crashed into the snow together, boy, metal, fur, teeth, a tangle of limbs and claws. The wolf's weight crushed the breath out of him. Hot saliva dripped onto his neck. Its teeth scraped his jaw, searching for a grip, for a vein. Eli shoved, muscles screaming. The iron slipped in his numb fingers. "This is it," he thought. "This is where you vanish and nobody notices." Somewhere under the wolf's growling, another sound began to bleed into the night. At first, he thought it was the storm shifting, the wind changing direction. Then it grew, a low, rolling thunder that didn't match the sky. Engines. Not one. Not two. Dozens. The sound climbed, layered, swelled until the very air around him seemed to vibrate. The wolves faltered, ears flattening, heads turning toward the road above. The alpha froze on Eli's chest, snarling as if confused by something it had never heard before. Eli heaved, throwing the animal off long enough to suck in a freezing breath. Up on the ridge, through the whipping snow, a wall of lights appeared. Headlamps. Hundreds of them, cresting the hill like a second, mechanical sunrise. The roar of motorcycles crashed over the mountain road, deeper and heavier than any truck. The ground trembled under Eli's back. Maria's fingers clamped around his wrist with impossible strength. "They came," she croaked. Her eyes filled with something wild and bright. "Kid, you don't know what you just started." The first bikes broke through the storm at the top of the curve, chrome skulls and red-white patches blazing in the lights, engines snarling like caged thunder. 300 Hell's Angels rolled toward the wolves, toward the ditch, toward the homeless boy who'd stepped into a battle he couldn't win. And in the instant before they reached him, every engine cut at once, plunging the mountain into a roaring silence as the riders swung their boots to the ground and began to move. The first boot that hit the snow sounded like a hammer on Eli's nerves. Engines still ticked in the freezing air, 300 of them cooling in a jagged line along the mountain road, chrome skulls and red-white patches glowing in the headlights. The wolves had vanished into the tree line the moment the roar hit, leaving torn snow, blood, and a trembling boy clutching a rusty tire iron beside an old woman who refused to die. All that noise, all that power, and now the only sound was the crunch of heavy steps coming down the embankment toward him. A giant of a man appeared through the spinning snow, broad shoulders wrapped in a leather vest, gray beard frosted white at the edges. His eyes were hard as frozen gravel, his jaw tight. The patch on his chest read President. Another, larger one across his back screamed Hell's Angels, Yellowstone, wrapped around a skull with flaming wings. He took in the scene in one sweeping glance, the shredded leg, the blood, the iron in Eli's shaking hands. Maria, he said, and Eli had never heard a name crack like that before. If stories like this grip you, hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next twist. There's a lot more coming for Eli, Maria, and the army that just rolled in. Maria tried to smile, but it twisted into a grimace. Took your time, Razor, she rasped. Eli blinked. Razor. The name hit him like a slap. This mountain ghost of a woman, torn apart in the ditch, was the mother of the man now staring at him with murder in his eyes. Razor dropped to his knees at her side, gloveless hands gentle as they brushed snow from her face. Ma, he whispered, and the words sounded too small for a man that size. What did they do to you? What they'll do to everyone, Maria wheezed, if you don't get that ledger to the right hands. Razor's gaze snapped to Eli, locked onto him like a sight on a target. For a second the boy thought the man might just crush him for letting his mother get hurt at all. You, Razor said. His voice was low, flat, dangerous. You the one who kept her breathing. Eli's mouth went dry. Every instinct he had screamed at him to shrink back, to disappear the way he always did when grown men raised their voices. But Maria's fingers were still wrapped around his wrist like a lifeline. I hit the wolves, he managed. Tried to keep them off. Razor studied him. Bare feet turning purple in the snow. Torn hoodie stiff with someone else's blood. Hands clenched so tight on the tire iron his knuckles looked like cracked porcelain. You homeless? Razor asked. The question landed heavy, no pity in it, just fact-finding. Eli swallowed. Yeah. Name. Eli. For a moment, the president of the Yellowstone chapter of the Hells Angels and a homeless 17-year-old boy just stared at each other through the curtain of falling snow. Engines rumbled softly higher up the road as the rest of the riders shifted, watching, waiting for a signal. Razor broke eye contact first, turning back to Maria. We got you, Ma. Hawk. He bellowed, his voice detonating across the ridge. Another biker moved down the slope with surprising speed for a man that size, braids whipping, Norse symbols inked down both arms. He dropped a medical kit into the snow, kneeling opposite Razor. Tourniquet, Hawk muttered, already pulling a belt free. We're burning time. Eli flinched as they cinched the leather around Maria's thigh. She screamed, the sound tearing out of her like something leaving her body forever. Razor flinched but didn't loosen his grip. "Stay with me," he growled. "You don't get to check out." "Not now." Eli looked up toward the road. 300 bikers stood in clusters, silhouettes against the lights, smoke curling from cigarettes, breath frosting the air. Some watched like they'd seen scenes like this 100 times. Others shifted with a kind of restless, leashed violence, as if they were furious the enemy wasn't in front of them yet. "What ledger?" Eli asked, the word Maria had gasped still burning in his ears. She said, "They'll burn the town if they get it." Hawk's eyes flicked to Razor. The president's jaw tightened. "That's club business," Razor said. Maria's hand shot out, snagging his vest. "He saved my life," she gritted. "They sent wolves for me, Razor." "Wolves? You think this is just club now?" Razor's gaze slid back to Eli. The boy didn't try to look away. "I was walking," Eli said quietly, voice scraping the cold. "Heard her scream. Could have kept going." "But you didn't," Maria hissed, and there was iron under the pain. Eli shook his head. "I'm tired of watching people die while I hide." Something in Razor's face shifted. Not softening exactly, men like him didn't soften, but recalculating. "The vultures," he said finally. "That's who wants her dead." The name meant nothing to Eli, but the way Hawk spat in the snow at the sound of it told him it should. "They run meth like it's water," Hawk growled. "Traffic kids, burn neighborhoods when someone talks. And we've been circling each other for years, waiting for one clean shot." Razor nodded toward Maria's vest. "She got it." Maria coughed, blood on her lips. "Their own greed," she rasped. "They recorded everything. Transactions. Names. Deals with dirty cops. Torture. Dumping bodies." Her eyes burned. "We got proof now, Razor. But they've got men in every department from here to state capitol. Wrong set of hands, it disappears. And so do we." Eli's fingers tightened on the tire iron. In the distance, down in Frostbite Ridge, he could almost see the town in his mind, motel lights flickering, the diner where he sometimes scraped plates for leftover fries, the underpass where 3 other kids slept tonight under thin blankets. "Where is it?" Razor asked. Maria licked dry lips. "Tucked in the lining of my bike bag. Vulture scouts hit me at the ridge. Ran me off. When I went down, they sent wolves to finish the job." As if summoned by the word, a howl tore through the trees, distant but close enough to raise goosebumps on Eli's skin. The remaining wolves hadn't gone far. They were watching. Waiting. "Bikes in a ditch half a mile back," Maria gasped. "They'll circle back when they lose my trail." Razor looked at Hawk. "We need that drive. We lose it, we lose everything." Hawk nodded once. Razor turned to Eli. "You know this mountain?" Eli blinked, surprised to be addressed again. "Every crack and shortcut from town up," he said. "Been walking it my whole life." "Then you know where they'll come from when they realize Ma didn't bleed out where they left her." Eli thought of the tight switchbacks, the blind corners, the collapsed service road above the quarry where the wind howled like a siren. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I know. Razor studied him for another long beat. The wind whipped harder, carrying the faint echo of another howl. Then congratulations, Eli, Razor said. Tonight you're riding with us. The words didn't make sense at first. Eli actually glanced behind him to see if another person had stepped up. Me? You're the one who dragged my mother out of a wolf pack with a piece of scrap, Razor replied. That makes you more useful than half the guys who just stand around looking mean. He jerked his chin toward the road. Ghost, he barked, and a lean biker with dark eyes and a quiet gait peeled away from the line. Get the kid a helmet. He's riding lead scout. Eli's chest seized. I don't know how to be around. Razor leaned in close, his voice dropping low enough that only Eli could hear. You know how to be scared and move anyway, he asked. Eli swallowed. Yeah. Then you know enough. Ghost pressed a helmet into Eli's hands. It was scuffed, a little too big, but solid. Eli stared at it like it was some relic from another life, something knights wore in old stories instead of kids who slept under bridges. Razor, Maria croaked. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. You get that ledger, to the right man, you hear me? Not just any badge. The right one. Razor squeezed her hand. I swear. Her gaze slid to Eli. And you, don't let them turn you into a ghost. You were meant for more than alley shadows, kid. Emotion punched the air out of him. His throat burned. He shoved the helmet onto his head before anyone could see his eyes shine. Up on the road, bikes roared back to life in ripples as the word spread down the line. Engines thundered, lights flared. The quiet was gone, replaced by a storm of steel and gasoline. Hawk and two others lifted Maria carefully, carrying her up the embankment toward a truck with a red cross spray-painted on the side. Razor clapped Eli on the shoulder, harder than he meant to. You ride beside Ghost, he shouted over the swelling noise. You see anything that doesn't belong, you point. We move when you move. Got it? Eli nodded, heart hammering so hard it shook his ribs. He clambered onto the back of Ghost's bike, hands hesitant until the man reached back and placed them firmly around his own waist. Hold on, kid, Ghost said, voice calm, almost amused. First ride's always the roughest. The line began to roll. Headlights cut through the snow, turning the road into a glowing tunnel. Trees flashed past in a blur of black and white. The cold wind slapped Eli's face through the helmet visor, tearing tears from the corners of his eyes. He forced them open, scanning the darkness ahead, every sense stretched thin. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking alone. Power surrounded him. 300 engines pulsing like a single heart, 300 men moving as one, all for a drive full of ugly truth and an old woman who refused to die. Down the mountain, the town of Frostbite Ridge slept, unaware that its fate now hung on a homeless boy's eyes and a biker gang's code. Ghost leaned back just enough for Eli to hear him over the roar. Ditch where they ran her off is about 3 curves up, he called. Keep sharp. Eli squinted through the swirling snow, muscles tensed. The world narrowed to the slice of road in front of them, the dark that might hide wolves, bullets, or worse. Then he saw it. A set of fresh tire tracks cut across the road ahead, veering toward the guardrail where Maria's bike must have gone over. But they weren't alone. Two more sets crisscrossed them, heavier treads, deeper gouges, the clear sign of trucks that had stopped, turned, and then headed back, in the direction of town. Eli's gut turned to ice. He slammed his palm against Ghost's chest, yelling over the engines. "Stop! We're too late, someone else found her bike first." The line of bikes shuddered as Ghost hit the brakes. Engines snarled down from a roar to a growl, 300 headlights washing over the frozen curve where Maria had gone off the road. Snow still lay churned and bloody at the guardrail, but the clean, sharp pattern of motorcycle tracks had been mangled by something heavier. Deep, square imprints where trucks had pulled in, stopped, and turned back toward town. Eli's stomach flipped as the realization hit, they weren't the first ones here. If you want to see how deep this story goes, like and subscribe before the next blow lands. Eli's night is only just starting to fall apart. Razor's bike rolled up beside Ghost, engine rumbling like barely leashed rage. He looked from the guardrail to the double tracks, his jaw clenching until the muscles jumped. "Talk," he snapped. Eli pointed, breath coming out in clouds. "Those aren't just from Maria's bike. 2 trucks, maybe more. They stopped here, turned around, and went back down the ridge." He swallowed hard. "They found where she crashed before we did." Hawk knelt by the twisted metal at the bottom of the drop, his flashlight cutting through the dark. What was left of Maria's motorcycle lay crushed against a boulder, glass scattered like ice. The side bag that should have held the ledger was hanging open, straps sliced clean. "They took it," Hawk called up, voice cold. "Bag's empty. Cut the leather right off." Razor swore under his breath, a low, murderous sound. Around them, the angels shifted, boots grinding in the snow. The ledger, the device Maria had bled for, the proof of everything the vultures had done, was no longer in their hands. They headed back toward Frostbite, Ghost said, eyes tracking the tire marks. Straight shot down the main road, no detours. Eli's mind raced. Frostbite Ridge was small, but it was full of places that never saw a cop, the abandoned cannery, the old rock quarry, the dead strip mall off Highway 9. If the vultures had the ledger, they'd take it somewhere nobody would interrupt if things got loud. Where would they go? Razor asked, more to himself than anyone else. They've got the proof. Why not run? Because running makes them prey, Hawk answered, climbing back up the slope. And Viper trained his lieutenants different. They'll want to make a statement first. Scare anyone else from ever crossing them. Eli's chest tightened. A statement, like what? Razor looked at him, and in his eyes Eli saw the answer before the man said a word. They'll hit the town, Razor growled. Hard. Fast. Somewhere public. Somewhere they can make an example. Eli saw it in his head. The diner windows shattering, the shelter doors kicked in, the underpass where he used to sleep lit orange by burning tents. Kids running barefoot on ice. People screaming with nowhere to go. You said they'd burn it off the map if they got that drive, he whispered, Maria's warning echoing in his ears. Razor nodded once. And now they've got both, the proof and the rage. The president turned his bike toward the dark ribbon of road leading down to Frostbite Ridge. He didn't shout, didn't raise his arms. He just twisted the throttle, and 300 engines answered like a single animal, a tidal surge of sound rolling down the mountain. "Mount up," Hawk barked. "We're done chasing tracks. Time to cut them off before they light a match." Ghost revved his bike. Eli climbed back on, hands finding their grip at the man's waist. The helmet felt tighter now, the wind colder. This wasn't just about one dying woman in a ditch anymore. It was about everyone who had ever looked through him like he wasn't there. As they rolled, Eli's mind raced through the town's layout. The vultures wouldn't risk the police station, not yet. The motel was too exposed. But the rock quarry, half abandoned, off the main road, big enough to park trucks and bikes out of sight. "There's a place," Eli shouted over the engines, leaning close to Ghost's ear. "Old quarry east of town. No patrols. No cameras. Just busted concrete and a dead road." Ghost relayed it with a hand signal, 2 fingers tapping his helmet then pointing left. The signal rippled down the line like falling dominoes. Razor lifted a fist, then swung it toward the side road that cut through the trees. The column pivoted as one. The deeper they rode, the quieter it got. The town's distant glow faded. Snow swallowed sound. Trees pressed in, branches clawing at the edges of the light. Eli could feel the change in the men around him. The jokes died off. Shoulders hunched. Heads dipped. They were sliding into hunting mode. "Eyes up," Ghost called. "Quarry entrance is a blind curve. If they're there, they'll have a lookout." Eli forced his gaze forward, scanning every shadow. The road narrowed, guardrail rusted and broken in places where drunk drivers had misjudged the turn. A faded sign appeared on the right, half buried in snow, "Blast Zone. Keep out." "Here," he shouted. Ghost slowed, and the line behind them bunched up, engines snarling low. The entrance to the quarry was nothing more than a gap in the rock face, a 1-lane road that dipped sharply out of sight. No lights, no movement. "Too quiet," Hawk muttered from a few bikes back. Razor pulled up alongside Ghost and Eli, visor up, breath fogging the night. "Talk me through it, kid," he said. "What's down there?" Eli swallowed, picturing the place from memory. "Road drops into a bowl," he said. "Big open pit in the middle, cliffs all around. Old concrete platforms, rusted cranes, busted trailers. Only one way in and out unless you feel like climbing rock with a broken neck." Razor's eyes narrowed. "A cage." "Yeah. But one with good perches," Eli added, nodding toward the cliff edges. "You put shooters up top, anyone inside is boxed in." Hawk cracked a humorless smile. "You've got an eye for killing grounds, kid." "I grew up hiding in them," Eli shot back before he could stop himself. Razor considered the darkness yawning before them. "If they're smart, they'll park in the center," he said. "Trucks in a circle, bikes as a ring. Make it hard for anyone to get close without being seen. They already know someone else wants that ledger," Hawk added. "They'll be expecting company." Razor glanced at Eli. "You sure about this?" Eli's pulse hammered. He thought about saying no. About suggesting they call someone, anyone, with a badge who wasn't bought. But Maria's voice came back, ragged and sure, not just any badge. The right one. He didn't know any right ones. "I'm sure," he said. If they're anywhere, they're down there. Razor nodded once. Then we make the ground work for us. He spun his bike to face the line, lifting a fist. Engines dropped to a low, dangerous murmur. Listen up, he shouted, his voice cutting through the cold. The vultures hid our blood tonight. They took what could bury them and they're hiding with it like rats. They think we'll come charging in blind and die in their trap. They think fear will make us stupid. A rumble of anger rolled through the riders. We're not stupid, Razor went on. We're patient. We're mean. And we take care of our own. He pointed at the quarry road. Hawk, you take 30 men and circle to the east ridge. Ghost, you take 30 to the west. I want shooters on those cliffs, overlapping fire. Nobody fires until I say. We're not here for a brawl. We're here to end this. And me? Eli asked, breath fogging inside his helmet. Razor looked at him for a long moment. You know the paths better than any of us, he said. You showed us the way here. I need you to show Hawk the access trail to the East Ridge. It's not on any map, is it? Eli shook his head. Old blasting path. Half washed out. But you can get a bike up if you're careful. Then you're with Hawk, Razor said. After that, you stay back. You've done enough. Eli opened his mouth to argue, but the president was already rolling toward the entrance. The line split, bikes peeling off into 3 groups. Hawk jerked his chin for Eli to follow, and together they cut into the trees, engines climbing as the ground tilted. The access trail was exactly as Eli remembered, narrow, icy, barely more than a scar in the hillside. Branches slapped his arms. Rocks skittered under Ghost's tires. More than once, he was sure they'd slide sideways into the ravine, but the bikers rode with grim, practiced focus, handling the terrain like it was just another bad road. By the time they reached the East Ridge, Eli's hands were numb and his heart was beating in his throat. The quarry opened beneath them like a wound. Floodlights, harsh and white, had been set up around the central pit, turning the snow into a glaring stage. 2 black trucks formed a makeshift wall, their backs to each other, vulture symbols spray-painted on the doors, ragged birds with hooked beaks and hollow eyes. Bikes were parked in a loose ring around them, exhaust still steaming. Men moved in the open, dark shapes with guns slung low, their leather vests marked by that same bird. Laughter drifted up faintly, ugly and sharp. Someone threw something into a barrel fire, sparks flew up into the artificial day. Eli's gaze snagged on the center of it all. A folding table had been set up between the trucks. On it, propped like an offering, sat a small, open case with cables spilling out. A laptop glowed beside it. And facing the screen, arms folded, stood a man whose stillness made the hair on Eli's arms rise. He was tall, lean, with a weather-cut face and hair slicked back from a high forehead. A scar ran from his left ear to his jaw, twisting his mouth into a permanent half-sneer. He watched whatever flickered on the laptop with the casual focus of someone reviewing a grocery list, not the kind of footage Maria had described. Cole, Hawk muttered, the name like a curse. Viper's favorite snake. Cole clicked the laptop shut and turned, surveying his men. Even from this distance, Eli could feel the temperature drop. The vultures closest to him straightened instinctively, attention snapping tight. We've got what we came for, Cole called, voice amplified by the rock. Ledger's ours. Proof's ours. They thought they could take us apart with our own dirt. He smiled, slow and humorless. They forgot who taught most of these cops how to be dirty in the first place. A ripple of rough laughter moved through the quarry. But we're not done, Cole continued. Because somewhere out there, some idiot thinks he can play hero. Some kid pulled our target out of a ditch and made 300 angels think they still have a say. He tilted his head back, eyes scanning the dark edges of the pit. Eli went cold. He's talking about you, Hawk whispered. Cole's gaze drifted dangerously close to their ridge. So here's how we send a message, he said. We torch this town's spine, the shelter, the diner, the garage. We put bodies where every camera can see them. And when the angels roll in late to the party, they'll find our calling card. He raised his hand. One of his men dragged something from behind a truck. No, someone. Eli's breath stopped as a struggling figure was hauled into the floodlight, a man in greasy coveralls, wrists tied, blood on his forehead. Eli recognized him with a jolt. It was Deke, the mechanic who used to slip him stale donuts and let him warm his hands by the space heater when nobody was looking. Found him poking around our trucks, Cole said lightly, gripping Deke's hair and yanking his head back. Said he just wanted to help the angels. Deke's eyes searched the darkness, wild, as if he could feel Eli watching. Please, Deke croaked. You don't have to. Cole pulled a pistol from his belt and pressed it to the man's temple, still smiling that dead smile. Relax, he murmured. You're just the opening act. Hawk's hand tightened on his rifle. Around Eli, the angels on the ridge shifted, fingers brushing triggers, eyes locked on the scene below. Not yet, Hawk whispered, reminding himself as much as them. We wait for Razor's signal. One shot too early, and we lose the element of surprise. Below, Cole's finger curled around the trigger. Eli's heart slammed against his ribs so hard it hurt. If they waited, Deke would die. If they fired, the vultures would scatter, maybe with the ledger, maybe into the town. Every choice was a loss. Every heartbeat was a countdown. Cole's smile widened, the gun steady. And just as the shot was about to crack the air, a single, distant motorcycle engine revved in the darkness behind the quarry, louder than it had any right to be. Drawing every head, angel and vulture alike, toward a new threat they hadn't planned for. Every head snapped toward the sound. The vultures by the trucks raised their guns, eyes narrowing toward the darkness beyond the floodlights. On the ridge, the angels shifted, rifles pressing deeper into shoulders. Eli's pulse hammered so hard he felt it in his teeth. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The whole pit held its breath. If stories like this have you hooked already, like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Eli's night is about to decide who walks out of this place, and who doesn't. The engine cut. Silence crashed back in, thicker than before. Then a single bike rolled into the edge of the light from a side access road Eli hadn't even known existed, tires crunching slow over frozen gravel. The rider wore no colors, just a dark jacket and a plain black helmet, visor down. He eased to a stop a few yards from the nearest vulture and turned the engine off with casual fingers, as if he'd wandered into a parking lot instead of a war zone. Cole didn't move the gun from Deke's head. You're late, he called, voice echoing off rock. And you're outnumbered. The helmet tilted. When the rider spoke, the voice was calm, almost bored. Funny, he said. From where I'm sitting, looks like you're the one standing in a hole. A ripple of laughter moved through the angels on the ridge. Cole's mouth tightened. You alone? Cole asked. The rider shrugged. You know how it is. Friends drop in when they smell trouble. He reached slowly up, fingers hooking the helmet. In one smooth motion, he pulled it off. Razor's face caught the floodlight. Eli's breath stopped. On the ridge, Hawk swore softly, and 300 hearts seemed to slam into a different rhythm at once. Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. President himself, he said. Didn't think you'd crawl into my grave quite this easy. Razor swung off the bike, boots landing steady in the snow. Without his vest, he looked less like a myth and more like a man whose mother was bleeding in the back of a truck somewhere on this mountain. But there was nothing soft in his gaze. You dug this grave, Razor said. I'm just here to decide who stays in it. Guns clicked all around the pit as vultures shifted their aim toward him. Up on the ridge, fingers slid to triggers. Eli felt the angels around him coil, every muscle waiting for Razor's next move. Ledger's ours now, Cole said. I'm thinking we keep it. Maybe even send a copy to the news, show them how much of your club and mine is on those lists. Watch the world burn from both ends. Razor's eyes flicked to the folding table, the laptop, the open case. He saw what Eli had seen, their one clean shot at tearing the vultures down, sitting in the open like bait. You won't send anything, Razor said quietly. Because you know once this kind of truth's out, nobody trusts anybody. And you're not a king without a kingdom to scare. Cole's laugh was thin. Cute. You came here to negotiate, Razor. Razor shook his head. I came here to give you one last chance to walk away. Leave the drive. Leave the town. Take your birds and fly somewhere we won't bother to follow. Cole's gun pressed harder into Deke's temple. And why, he asked, each word a nail, would I ever do that? Razor rolled his shoulders, as if loosening a weight. He tipped his head slightly. Because you're not the only one with snakes in the grass. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the quarry walls lit up with muzzle flashes. The first shots came from the west ridge, ripping into the vultures posted by the trucks. Men dropped, shouts cutting through the night. Hawk's team opened up from the east, bullets chipping stone inches from Cole's boots. Floodlights shattered, plunging half the pit into shadow. The air turned to thunder and fire. Eli flinched as a bullet whined past his ear. Hawk was already barking orders, directing fire, keeping it controlled. They didn't spray, they cut. Vultures scrambled for cover behind the trucks, some firing wildly up at the ridges, others dragging crates and metal sheets to build makeshift shields. Cole didn't flinch. He pivoted, dragging Deke with him as a human shield, backing toward the table where the ledger sat. A round smashed into the laptop, sending sparks flying. Another punched a hole in the case. Eli's heart lurched. If that drive gets hit, all of this is for nothing. Razor dove behind his bike as bullets tore into the ground where he'd been standing. He rolled, came up with a pistol in each hand, and started firing, not at the vultures spraying the ridges, but at the floodlights, at the barrels of their guns, at their feet. He moved like he'd been born in crossfire. "Kid!" Hawk shouted, his voice a whip. "Eyes on Cole." Eli snapped his gaze back just in time to see Cole shoving Deke toward the edge of the pit. "They want a show," Cole yelled, voice cracking with savage delight. "Let's give them one." He kicked Deke's legs out. The mechanic staggered, teetered on the crumbling edge. "No!" Eli's scream tore out of him before he knew he was moving. He didn't think about the drop, or the bullets, or the fact that nobody down there even knew his name. He just moved. Snow and ice slid under his boots as he scrambled along the ridge, dropping to his stomach and dragging himself to a narrow outcrop that hung dangerously over the quarry. "Eli!" Ghost's shout was lost in the chaos. Below, Cole stepped back from the edge, pistol swinging toward Razor now. Deke flailed, one foot skidding over empty air. Eli launched himself off the ridge. For a frozen second, he was weightless. The world narrowed to Deke's wide, terrified eyes, the blast of cold against his face, the white blur of the pit racing up. Then his fingers closed around Deke's wrist with a jolt that nearly dislocated his shoulder. The rest of him slammed into the cliffside. Pain exploded through his chest. His legs dangled over nothing, boots kicking at air. Deke's weight tore at his grip. "I got you." Eli gasped, voice breaking. Rock scraped his ribs. His fingers screamed. "Don't let go." Deke sobbed, breath fogging in Eli's face. "Kid, I..." A bullet smacked into the rock inches from Eli's head, spraying stone dust into his eyes. He squeezed them shut, teeth clenched. "Hold your fire." Razor's roar ripped across the quarry. "You hit that wall, you kill them both." For a moment, miraculously, the gunfire ebbed. The pit rang with curses, the hiss of cooling metal, the ragged breathing of men who had seen too many close calls. Cole's voice cut through it like a knife. "And here I thought that boy was just a rumor." Eli blinked the grit from his eyes. Cole stood a few yards back from the edge now, gun not quite pointed at him, pointed just enough that everyone knew who decided if this turned into an execution. "You," Cole called up. "You must be the kid who dragged my problem out of the snow." Eli's arms shook. His fingers slipped a fraction. Deke whimpered. "Let him go," Cole said pleasantly. "You got your 5 minutes of hero. Time's up." Eli swallowed blood. Somewhere above, he could feel Hawk's rifle trained, feel 300 angels ready to turn the quarry into hell at one word. Somewhere behind Cole, the ledger sat on the table, one bullet away from disappearing into static. He thought of Maria's cracked voice. "Don't let them turn you into a ghost." "No," Eli rasped. Cole's smile died. "What?" "I said no." Eli's voice gained strength one word at a time. "You don't get to decide who matters and who doesn't. Not tonight." "Kid," Razor warned, hearing the edge in Cole's silence. Eli took a breath that felt like fire. "You want the ledger so bad," he shouted. "You want the angels so scared they never crawl out of their holes again." His eyes locked on Cole's. "Then take your shot at me. But I promise you one thing." He shifted his weight, using the cliff's jagged edge like a ladder, screaming muscles dragging Deke up inch by inch. "When I walk out of here," Eli said, "every kid who sleeps under a bridge is going to know your name. And not because they fear you." He gritted his teeth, hauled, felt Deke's chest scrape the rock. "Because you finally lost." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Cole laughed, a short, harsh bark that held no humor at all. "Bold," he said. "Stupid." His gun came up, steady as stone. "Let's see how far that mouth gets you." He never fired. A single shot cracked from the west ridge, sharp and clean. Cole jerked, eyes widening in surprise as a bloom of red spread across his shoulder, spinning him sideways. The pistol flew from his hand, clattering across the concrete. "Angel rules, bird brain." Hawk bellowed. "You point a gun at a kid, you lose your arm." Chaos snapped back. Angels opened up from both ridges, fire focused now, controlled. Without Cole's steady malice at their center, the vultures crumbled. Some ran for their bikes and were cut down. Others dove for the trucks. One stupidly grabbed for the laptop and caught a round through the wrist for his trouble. Razor surged forward, guns barking, driving toward the table. Ghost and a squad of angels pounded down the access path, boots sliding, rifles raised to cover him. Eli didn't see the rest of the fight. His world shrank to burned muscles and torn skin as he heaved Deke up one last time. Their chests hit the ledge together. For a terrible second, he thought they'd both go over. Then hands grabbed the back of his hoodie, the collar of Deke's coveralls. Angels dragged them the rest of the way onto solid ground. Eli lay on his back, staring up at the spinning sky, lungs tearing at the air. Deke rolled onto his side and sobbed like a child. Below, the gunfire stuttered, then died. Silence fell over the quarry, broken only by the ticking of hot engines and the soft moans of the wounded. Floodlights flickered, some blown out, others casting the scene in harsh, uneven white. Razor stood by the folding table, chest heaving, pistol still in his hand. At his feet, Cole groaned, clutching his shoulder, blood dripping between his fingers. Two angels held him down, boots planted firm. On the table, miraculously untouched, sat the open case Maria had bled for. Inside, cushioned in foam, the small drive winked up at them like an unassuming stone that could topple empires. Razor holstered his gun and picked it up. For a long moment, he just looked at it. Then he tipped his head back toward the ridges. "Hawk," he called. "Tell Ma we got her proof." A cheer went up, ragged and raw. Some laughed. Some just closed their eyes in relief. On the ridge, Eli pushed himself to sitting, every muscle protesting. Ghost crouched beside him. "You jump off cliffs often?" he asked. Eli managed a weak grin. "Only on Thursdays." Ghost snorted. "You're an idiot," he said. "But you're our idiot now." Razor climbed the access path, boots crunching. When he reached Eli, he didn't say anything at first. He just studied the boy, bloody, shaking, eyes still bright. "You had no reason to come here tonight," Razor said quietly. "No patch. No promise. Just a woman you didn't know in a ditch." Eli swallowed, throat tight. "I was tired of running," he said. "Tired of feeling like a ghost in my own life." Razor nodded slowly. Then let's fix that. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded scrap of leather. When he opened his hand, Eli saw a small, custom-stitched patch, a wolf's head, eyes bright, backed by a pair of angel wings. Maria had this made, Razor said. Said if she made it, this was yours. Said any boy who dragged her out of a wolf pack deserved a name. He pressed the patch into Eli's palm. Welcome to the world, Wolf Kid, Razor said. You ain't invisible anymore. Eli stared at the patch, at the rough stitches, at the symbol that meant he belonged somewhere for the first time in his life. Heat burned behind his eyes. He blinked hard, but the tears came anyway. Does this mean, his voice cracked, I ride with you? Razor's smile was tired but real. It means wherever this patch is worn, you've got people who answer when you call, he said. Doesn't matter if you're in Frostbite Ridge or the other side of the world. Family spends the bad nights together. Eli closed his fingers around the leather, holding it like it might vanish. Above the quarry, dawn started to bleed into the sky, a faint gray light pushing back the stars. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance now, late, as always, but this time, the ground had already shifted. There would be files. Names. Arrests. Deals made and broken. The vultures would limp, bleed, maybe die. Eli looked down at the pit where it had all gone wrong and somehow right. At the men picking up their wounded. At the place where he'd dangled over nothing and decided he wasn't ready to disappear. He thought of Maria in the back of the truck, stubborn heartbeat refusing to quit. Of Deke's terrified eyes turning hopeful. Of every kid huddled under cardboard in this town, listening to engines and wondering if anyone would ever ride for them. Razor, he said softly. When this is over. What happens to people like me? Razor followed his gaze down into the quarry, then out toward the barely waking town. We build something, he said. Somewhere nobody's trash. Place to land when the world kicks you out. Maria's been talking about it for years. Guess now we got a reason. He clapped a heavy hand on Eli's shoulder. Wolf's Rest, Razor said. That's what she wants to call it. The name settled into Eli's bones like warmth. Wolf's Rest. A place for ghosts who refuse to stay dead, for kids who'd learned to fight wolves with bare hands and rusted metal. A place where engines meant safety, not danger. Where a homeless boy could walk through the door and hear his name instead of silence. Eli closed his eyes for a second, letting the idea take shape. When he opened them, the sun was pushing over the ridge, turning the snow to blinding gold and painting chrome in fire. Angels moved below, cleaning up, standing guard, watching the road. For the first time, Eli didn't feel like he was looking at someone else's story. He was in it. He stood, wincing, and slipped the patch into his pocket over his heart. Let's go get your mom, he said. We've got a lot to build.